so much of the struggle right now is just setting up systems, like creating a literal space that is like conducive for communicating and like figuring out where my microphone goes, figuring out where I sit, how I sit. It's like, it's just, my process is one of just tinkering. I mean, this seems okay. All right. Well, Nick here. It's May 5th, 2025. 555. There's a lot of fives going on. And the world is changing immensely in real time. Yeah, I feel like it's okay. I got to figure it out. The microphone, I'm using this Zoom mic right now, and it's like it's functional, and that's the important part, because I am a perfectionist, which is really just an excuse to like never start and never put yourself out there. And if you never start and you never put yourself out there, you can never get hurt, is what I've found. Pretty much recently, this is what I've uncovered, which is that it is difficult, and you feel very unsafe and insecure going out of your comfort zone, subjecting yourself to criticism and public opinion and your own opinion, and just being like not happy with your work or feeling awkward. Literally like reflecting yourself back to yourself. I remember as a kid, I can't remember when it was, how old I was, but that feeling of like watching yourself back on tape. I grew up with a single mom until I was about 10, and we didn't have a video camera. So like I think it was until like when I was at like 10 or 11, that was like the first time I like heard myself on tape talking. And I remember like it made me so uncomfortable, because I was like, that's what I sound like. I don't like that. Like, it felt, the idea I had of myself in my head was different than what I saw, like objectively. I was confronted with this like cognitive dissonance. And I don't know why I just had that thought, but I guess this process I'm going through right now of like putting myself out there and just being like, this is who I am, and figuring it out. And it's like, you can never exactly translate who you are to the world, at least not yet. It's hard to show yourself exactly as who you are, right? Because we self-censor. We're complex beings. You can only communicate certain aspects of yourself at any given time. And even then, like, part of the communication process is what's happening on the receiving end. There's going to be someone out there seeing this right now that has one opinion, and someone else has an entirely different opinion, purely based on their own perception and their understanding of reality and their life experience, and some level of judgment of who I am. We're all working with perception that has been shaped by our unique experience and our unique makeup. But yeah, so I figured I'd just get on here and start talking about whatever. God, I kind of have a headache today. Both of my youngest son has been sick. Sick really bad. He's been dealing with congestion issues like basically since he's been born. He's developmentally doing great, hitting all of his milestones. The kid's huge. He's going to be hilarious. And, he's like in the 90 plus percentile size wise and size and weight, but he has been chronically sick, and I feel like I'm getting I've kind of got a headache, but I'm trying just to get in a zone where I'm just practicing. I'm talking, I'm getting my feelings out there. I'm expressing myself, and I'm putting myself out there as a means to transform. And as I'm sacrificing aspects of myself, aspects of my ego, I'm shedding. This is a process of both practicing, literally getting familiar with the mechanics of talking into a microphone, recording it, putting it out there, posting it online, which will get easier, and I will get more proficient and more competent over time. Like that's just how things work. So, I'm in the process of just overcoming that daunting task of putting myself out there, knowing that I will kind of suck and it will be fairly cringy and kind of awkward, but just doing it, because in order to get to the place that I want to go, which is being able to clearly articulate my ideas and really hone my understanding of reality and the things that I value and the things that I'm interested in. This is part of the process. At least for me, I have to learn by doing things firsthand. So that is the nature of this experiment. And it's deeper than just practicing, though. It's a threshold moment for me to go to the next level, which is one where I am more in control of the life that I want to live. Meaning that I'm writing my own story and I'm forging a path based on my passions, my interests, my values. That's part of what's going on here. The other aspect of this is here. Let me pause and get my thoughts here. In order for me to truly value myself, I have to identify the limiting self-beliefs, shed what isn't serving me in my consciousness, and let it go and forge a new version of me that is more in line with what I genuinely want out of life and what my genuine goals and values and interests and passions are. And so I am truly at a threshold moment. I'm in this liminal space where I'm not quite to where I want to go, but I am leaving my old way of doing things behind. I'm sort of in this space between a waking state and a dream state where I am not fully lucid, but I'm kind of I'm at this great separation. There's a fork in the road of do I really want to push through this, and what am I willing to sacrifice and give up in order to be able to like look in the mirror and really like what I see, and to wake up every day and be like super stoked and to feel like I'm just doing what I should be doing, and that I'm aligned with who I actually am on a deep level, and that I've resolved some of these underlying issues, you know? So this experiment of like really putting yourself out there and posting to social media, or creating your own personal website, or starting to write more and sharing it, or playing more music, even when you're bad at it, there is this immense power, because you are signaling to yourself and to the world of where you're going, and it starts creating momentum, and it starts creating movement, and there starts to be this sort of separation, and you start to realize what your fears are, what's holding you back, what's perhaps not serving you, what in your life are you doing, and are you around that is in line with where you want to go and who you really are deep down, and what is not. So it's important in putting yourself out there that you recognize that you're like you're being your own catalyst for transformation, and there is this death and dying process that comes with it. And in order to like level up or become a new thing and literally change your reality from one that might be filled with fear or dread or resentment or all sorts of negative emotions, in order to shift that, you have to sever all of the parts of yourself that are holding you in that vibrational state, that like frequency. And that may be, stopping certain activities, stopping to consume certain things. First of all, noticing, really noticing how you're going about life, how you think about yourself, how you're thinking in general, how you're feeling, what you're consuming, how you're spending your time. These are all signals. And ultimately, it's about noticing where your energy is going, and what your current reality is reflecting back to you. So if you're not content, and recently and it's really since COVID, in a lot of ways, really my whole life, it's been leading to this, but I've had a couple jobs, and I feel like I just kind of lost my mojo. I mean, I've been doing a lot. I got married, we've built a house, we've had 2 kids. I changed my last name. I reverted back to my birth name. I was Nick Decker until I was 10, and then my mom got married and I became Nick Wilson. I was like, sure, why not? I'll take that. I'll play that role for a while. And so I was Nick Wilson from, age 10 or so to age 36, 35. And then in advance of having kids, I was like, you know what? I feel like I need to revert back to my birth name. And so most people, like most of my friends, never knew this guy, Nick Decker. So I'm like kind of going through an identity crisis. And I went through this when I was 10, where I just basically like shed my old identity, moved from Iowa to Chicago, took up a new name, and kind of played this role and embraced it, knowing that like deep down, like not everyone knew the full story. I mean, I did, but ultimately, I think doing that did kind of fracture off a portion of myself, and like that must have had some sort of psychological effect of like denying an aspect of myself. So when I reverted back to my original birth name a few years ago in advance of our son being born, that it was this symbolic act of like reclaiming who I am and like course correcting. And the nature of my life has been one where if I'm not living in alignment, eventually I have to, if I'm not living in like a like truthfully and virtuously and honestly, eventually that there comes to be a reckoning where I have to like reconcile the situation and deal with the inner dissonance, because the pain becomes too overwhelming. And so really this idea of transforming personally it is a reaction to me having internal pain and longing and suffering due to inner dissonance and inner division within myself. And so in an effort to alchemize the pain and suffering in my life, I have to transform. And in order to be initiated into this new realm of reality, a higher level of reality where you're more whole and more yourself and more purified, I would say, there is this threshold moment that occurs before you're able to cross into the new realm. And there's this liminal state process where you're sort of like, you have demonstrated that you're willing to go, but like you get checked by nature, the laws of nature, to prove that you're willing to do what it takes, to sacrifice what it takes to go to the new next level. And for me, that's like putting myself out there, even though I'm kind of a perfectionist and like I'm like a classic overthinker. And so this idea of just sending stuff is tough for me, but I'm doing it specifically to kind of be like, I'm trusting the process. I'm just like, I'm committed to doing it. And so in these threshold moments, I've experienced enough of these, and sometimes I've crossed over to the other side, but sometimes I have like ultimately backed down and fallen back into my old ways, because I just kind of got beaten by that threshold moment with that final test of like, are you really willing to do the work to get to the other side? And I really don't want that to happen this time. And for me, what that looks like, I think, is when I get bounced back at the threshold, it comes in many different ways. You can self-sabotage, you can bypass the situation or attempt to, like that burning difficulty of crossing the fiery ring that surrounds where you are and where you want to go. You can't skip that. And if you try to skip that burn, you're going to end up back to where you started. and it'll still be painful. Like no matter what, it's going to be a painful and difficult process. It's going to you're going to get burned one way or the other. That's the way I see it. But I am just so fascinated with this concept of thresholds. And there's a lot of literature out there and writing about this in the sort of esoteric, mystical, mystery school traditions. Um, and I think the origin of threshold has to do with the word thresh, which is sort of this idea of separating what is valuable from what is not valuable. The sacred from the profane. So there's this the threshold is the you're at the door and you've got two different ways to go. Are you going to live, or are you going to courageously battle and put yourself out there and fight for it, or are you going to retreat? Are you willing to go through the portal into the unknown for the sake of a new life that you don't even know what it will be? Do you take the mystery box option, or do you return to your old habits, your old limiting beliefs, your own sense of like, I'm not good enough, or I can't do it, or this is the way it is? Um, you know, Focusing too much on what other people think versus, or how things have been done versus innovating or being unique, or dwelling in the realm of newness and mystery. uh, so the reality is that dwelling in this space and being in this phase feels very dangerous, feels very scary, but I am certain that it's just a necessary part of the process. The same way that the birth process is so intense, as having two kids and been there firsthand, front and center. It's such an intense, miraculous experience to be a part of. But there's no other way to get into the world, you know, than you know the intense way. And I know there's C-sections, there's traditional births, there's water births, there's all sorts of ways people can come into the world, and none of them are easy or comfortable. None of them are. And the same with the death process. Whatever happens on the other side of that, all I know is that we all have to go through it, and it's going to be intense. And so when you have these points in your life where you are essentially simulating the birth and death process, you must expect that same level of pain and intensity and fear and overcoming. And the reality that you must go through it. You must step through the doorway. You can't bypass that. There's no remote you can just fast forward through these stages. So that's what I'm doing now, and it's just this realization that like you have to start at some point. Otherwise, you never start, and you get to that point in your life when you feel immense regret. And I think it's really never too late to start. I mean, I think, if you're 70 or 75 and you're like, fuck, what have I been doing? I've been spending my whole life watching, sports games on TV and numbing myself with booze and basically bread and circus type entertainment. And that's not me disparaging entertainment or occasionally, taking time to watch a ball game or whatever. I mean, I grew up playing sports. I love sports. I don't really have time to watch that stuff anymore because to me it feels sort of like a distraction. That being said, like I want my sons to learn how to throw a ball, and I like the idea of spending time with them playing catch and kicking a ball around and doing that stuff sounds so fun. And we will do that. But you know, eventually the clock runs out and there's going to be this reckoning of like what have you been doing with your time? And I think it's never too late to take the first step towards confronting these questions within yourself. And it's got to be a process because it is a painful and difficult thing to confront your shadows, to really sit down and be like, what am I doing that is preventing me to get to where I'm going? And like, what do I need to do? And sometimes that may be changing habits or thought patterns, or realizing that like your body is out of balance. Like I've come to that realization. Like I've got definite issues with my nervous system where that I need to focus on resolving. And it probably has to do with like my root chakra, you know, how I grew up with kind of a single mom and moving around a bunch, and you know, some childhood issues. No matter what, everyone has issues. For me, there are definitely issues around feeling safe and secure and what makes me do that. And also feelings of self-worth that I need to address if I want to move forward. And so for me, addressing these things is just kind of throwing myself in the fire a bit and committing to working through it, and really getting clear about like, what do I want to do and what am I passionate about and why am I doing it, so that when it gets really tough, I can remember and not forget. You know, it's like when you have a dream that is very vivid and you feel like, wow, there's some symbolism here. This feels important. But then you wake up, and especially now with phones or whatever, like you look over at your phone and it's like, I got an email from Pinterest saying I'd like this. And in that 7-second time span, you forgot about the dream. You're like, fuck, I forgot. There was something really important. There was something really important that dream was trying to tell me. And I got some sort of bullshit email and I was distracted by something really not important. So what I'm trying to do right now, and I think is very, very vital, is like remembering that important thing. And like, okay, what do I really want to do? What am I really passionate about? What is the life that I really want to build? And like, for me, I need to like get it down and write it down. And if putting myself out there on social media, literally just to have a record of some of these things, it's more about like, for me, and hopefully I can add value to other people. But like, I mean, that really is a goal. But there's a purpose to it. It's like, I need to get it out and get it down and share it and express it and think about it, you know, of what I want out of life and the type of father and husband and friend and family member and community member and, you know, leader and business person that I want to be. Like, I'm really trying to get clear on that and to find a way to like not forget so that I can wake up from the dream and the everything that happened in the dream is like tattooed on my hand, and I'm like, great, I'm not going to forget that. I'm not going to forget this. I'm going to interact with what that was trying to tell me and what I learned, and I'm going to integrate that in order to get to where I want to go. And that's what it's all about. That's what we're all trying to do. And eventually there will be higher and higher levels of purification. I think to me, that's what life seems like it is just an ongoing series of, uh, basically filtering your consciousness for better or worse so that you're either closer to or farther away. You're either more pure or less pure. And not to get like, religious or dogmatic about it. It seems I relate to it more from like an alchemical, um, psychological standpoint of like really tuning in and getting clear. It's like a radio signal, right? Like a broadcast signal where it's like what your soul or your higher self or your your heart is telling you. There's such a clear path, and like what you put out there is a clear signal from that frequency. So for me, it's like God. I've got some sort of transmitter in me, which is this combination of like heart, brain working together to create a signal. And then my job is to clear out all of the bullshit, all of the programming, all of the trauma, and these things you just collect over time. It's like you collect these things in the weirdest places of like weird looks you got from a stranger on the street, or like something an old classmate said that like made you feel like shit, or of course things our parents and grandparents or our ancestors trauma cycles that were perpetuated. And that's really hard to not do as a parent. I see myself doing this all the time as a parent, where I catch myself being impatient or being critical or whatever, and I'm like, I'm really trying to do a good job at parenting and to not basically traumatize my kids by by doing things that are like idiosyncratic to me or whatever. Of, for example, I have a little bit of a temper at times, like when I feel like people are slowing me down, or and I don't know if you've ever tried to put on a 3-year-old's shoes and socks, but it's like so tedious and takes forever. And part of me is just like, it's very hard just to take a breath and be like, to enjoy the process. I can very, very easily get into this situation where I'm like, come on, let's go, bud. And, so it's like, oh shit, in order for me to resolve that, I've got to like come to the chamber of reflection, which is this room, and think about what's going on, and think about how that situation is triggering me. And I have to trace the trigger back to its origin and kind of be like, okay, this is where the disconnect is, and you have to heal that. And so this segues into another concept I've been thinking a lot about lately, which is breaking generationally destructive patterns or ancestral trauma. Whether it's coming from a family that dealt with alcoholism or physical abuse or verbal abuse or narcissism or whatever. if you're trying to be that person that is finally going to bear this ancestral emotional pain or these shadows and alchemize them so that future generations no longer have them, that requires an immense amount of strength and commitment and self-work and ultimately pain. You've got to bear the pain and transform it and transmute it into understanding and kind of course correct and iron them out of the system. And I'm trying to do that. I mean, I worry that the damage is already done with some of these things. Like, you know, when I raise my voice with my son, I'm like, God damn it. I'll say that, and then I'll catch myself, and then I'll see, maybe he gets upset, and then I end up apologizing. As someone that's not perfect as a parent, all I can do in that situation is apologize and try to explain dad is sometimes impatient. Dad is working on that. Uh, the reality is it takes a long time for kids to learn stuff. And if you are someone like me and used to moving fast and having a lot of freedom, and all of a sudden you've got these little kids they need someone to learn from, and they need someone to guide them. And it's a long, lengthy process for that to happen. There is an acceptance, and the part of you has to die off. That version of me that could just do whatever the hell he wanted whenever he wanted has been dying off. And part of me has probably been holding on to that. I'm really having to cross this threshold into a new version of myself that is much more understanding, patient, much more focused and committed to service and finding balance and doing what it takes to put myself in a position where I can be very, very active and lead by example. And so, this means contending with a lot of intense emotions and concepts, resentment or bitterness or angriness. And I've had a lot more of those feelings since I've had kids, probably than I ever had before, because it's like really pointing out my flaws or where I'm not aligned with what I really, really want to do. Artistically, creatively, professionally, spiritually, emotionally. For example, when I found myself in a job that I really didn't like because the whole philosophy and motivation of the job. Now I admire myself to a certain extent for taking it on and like trying it out and giving it a go for a year, and then ultimately not, coming to realize like I need to get out. But that created something in me of like, I felt bitterness and angriness in a way of spending my precious God-given energy and time in a way like doing something that I didn't really want to do or that I didn't fully believe in. And so this past year or two, it's just been this total shift of like, okay, I need to get very serious about what it is that I want to do and the type of life that I want to live for my own sanity, for my own health, in order for me to be the kind of husband and father and person that I want to be. In order for me to live out the story that I want to tell, or at least to live out a story that I'd want to be proud of, and to, leave a legacy. Um, I need to like get very real about what I'm here to do. And so that process looks different for everyone. I found a lot of value in researching various spiritual texts, mystery school texts, um, modalities, like really, really trying to understand astrology and psychology and human design, and you know the story and the process that's unfolding in the tarot and in mythology, which to me they're all pointing towards this process of development, of becoming who you are meant to be, of finding out what your gifts are, and how to, like, what that path looks like. That's entirely what I'm fascinated by. And I think you can get there, and you can do this through traditional religions too, to a certain extent, whether it's, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, etc. I tend to think that there's surface level teachings, and then there's the deep teachings. I tend to resonate more with the deeper teachings of the symbolism, of the wisdom underneath the surface of the literalism. For me, it's less about memorizing the story and more about understanding what the story is trying to tell you, in terms of what you can be taught, or what you can learn from that. And in terms of the astrology stuff, like I realize the public opinion from a lot of people that it's like woo woo, or it's nonsense. But I have personally found so much truth in it, and so much resonance in that. It's pointed to parts of myself that I had not considered. It's caused me to ask questions or think about things in certain ways, and to identify patterns in my behavior, in my life, in my experiences, and giving them, like, validating them in a lot of ways, and being like, what, that makes sense. And to me, it makes sense that, you know, there are these energetic bodies, celestial bodies, that influence the vibes down here, in the same way that music does, right? If the key in a song shifts from major to minor, you emotionally feel something different. Something changes in your emotions, in your way of being, in your way of processing reality changes. And, so back in the day when they used to talk about the music of the spheres, that personally really resonates with me today. Um, First of all, I just think it's cool and interesting and thought provoking. So I do have a problem when people are like, when people who have never explored these things, kind of disparage it, uh, because it's, whether it's taboo or it goes against preconceived notions. That irks me, because I know firsthand that there's something to it. I've seen that. And also, it's just kind of fun and interesting. At the very least, can it just be fun and interesting? Um, but the same thing goes for human design too. That is a modality that is fairly new in the grand scheme of, mystery school teachings, but I've seen a lot of examples where it's what's being put forth, it rings true. And ultimately, these are all signposts and pathways to knowing thyself. That's a huge part of the point of life. First of all, like really knowing thyself in a world surrounded by fucking noise and people cramming their opinions down your throat and all sorts of things that gum up your system or influence you. Basically everyone's been trying to sell us everything for so long, that our systems are burnt out and overloaded. And I even look back on my childhood and life, and so much of my personality, like going through middle school and high school, was shaped by music and film and TV shows. I think of like how me and my friends used to communicate. We would basically just quote movies and TV shows and like The Simpsons and, you know, Jim Carrey and Will Ferrell movies and, Sandler movies and stuff like that. We would basically communicate with each other through pop culture, which is such an interesting thing to consider. That just shows how our psyches and how we process everything was like through this aura of noise floating in the ether versus tapping into something much deeper and more primal in the heart, soul, spirit regions of our being. And so when I think about the great artists and thinkers and philosophers and geniuses of human history, these are people that found ways to cut through all that noise and overcome it somehow and access their God-given gifts and their unique genius, and then actually commit to it long enough to see it come to fruition. They're like, once you realize that seed of genius is in you, you have to do a lot of work to cultivate it and tend to it and let it grow and gestate and be born into this new thing. And we live in a battleground type environment of energy and consciousness and ideas and emotion, where that seed, there's a lot of forces and elements that are trying to kill that seed and stop it from growing. They want to see it aborted, or they want to see it, whether it's consciously or unconsciously. There's just a lot of forces at play that could cause that light to kind of fade or cause that seed to be drowned out or whatever. And many people never, I think, even attempt to find that seed of genius in them. Many people aren't even at that part of the journey of realizing, like, of trying to go within. And then many people, I think, do and then fail and then live a life of regret, or it's admittedly so tough. I think there's a small percentage of people that consciously go through that process to find that in them and find it and then commit. It's like going into the underworld, going into the dream world, finding that truth that's in you, managing to come out of the dream and not forget it and to keep the torch alive, sprinting headwind into the future, against all odds, to triumphantly overcome at the finish line and be like, I fucking did it. That's personally my goal. And I feel like not many people end up doing that because it's very hard. And that's the hero's journey. That's what it's all about. That's really what I'm most passionate about. And some of my loves are obviously books and music and art. And I think everything I love about all of that stuff is touching on these themes of striving for greatness, striving for truth, striving to overcome, and getting on the journey. And embracing the process, And there's a lot of stuff that doesn't resonate with me, maybe because I feel like the motivation of the art, or that there isn't that seed of that there. Like, it was maybe created for a reason that doesn't resonate. The same way I was working at that job that just didn't resonate with me, is because I'm like, we're not here for the same reason. I don't foundationally, I don't buy into it. And so, yeah, I think it's all very, very interesting. And honestly, I just enjoy talking about this stuff. And, part of my pain and resentment and bitterness of the past, several years of my life is feeling like I don't really have a community of people to talk about this with. I can't expect my wife to be everything. We spend so much time. We talk about a lot of great things. We talk about, we spend all of our time together. We've been building so much together. So it's not like I can't expect her to be everything. And frankly, it's just more about me working through my own shit so that I can be a better husband and father. But I came to this realization that I just need to do it myself. And so if it's talking into a microphone and putting it out there, whether or not anyone listens to this, or whether or not it even exists outside of a file on my computer, even if I'm not recording this right now, I don't even know. Maybe I'll cut this up, maybe I'll use it. But the very act of expressing it and thinking about it is symbolically it's that effort and that act of waking up from the dream, realizing that I've touched on something important inside myself, and writing that fucking dream down as soon as possible and trying to make sense of it, and not forgetting why, and not forgetting what it's all about. And it's amazing, this dream metaphor is so true. I've been thinking a lot about lately, over the course of my life, I've had certain recurring dreams, right? And there's certain recurring dreams that everyone has. Everyone at some point has the dream where, they go an entire semester at college and they realize they totally forgot about one class, and they're going to fail it because they didn't go to any class. You didn't go to any of the classes. You didn't study. You miss all the tests. Or that other school dream where you forget your locker combination. I had, when I was a kid, throughout my childhood, let me take a drink. there were a couple recurring dreams I had throughout my childhood. Um, there there was one, and I don't know, this recurring dream probably took place over a few years. And I've had them intermittently over the course of my life. I still remember these dreams vividly. One of the dreams took place at my grandparents' church in rural Iowa, this Catholic church. In the basement, there used to be this sort of like little banquet hall that events would be at, and all of that. And for the longest time, I had this recurring dream as a kid that I like found a in a closet. I found like a secret door in this banquet hall under the church that I opened, and there was like a secret passageway that was very spooky and dusty and clearly hadn't been accessed in a while. And I would retrace my steps. I would have the dream over and over, and over the course of a number of these dreams, I would get further along in the process of venturing into this secret passageway. Like I would have the dream and I'd be like, okay, I remember. It's like when you play a video game and you beat level 1, and then you beat level 2, and then you beat level 3, and then you lose all your lives and you got to start back at level 1, and eventually you get better and more effective at navigating the levels. It was this situation where like I would get further and deeper into the secret passageway and find like new rooms that had different things in them and different vibes to them and energies. And it's just I don't know why I'm thinking of this now, but well, I do know why. It's because I'm tapping into some very deep psychological truths. To me, how I interpret that now is that beneath the veil, beneath this facade of this Christian Catholic Church, there's a lot more going on to reality, to Christianity, to exploring. And you got to be willing to look in the hidden rooms. And I think it was a bit of a foretelling of what my life would be, which is one of a curious spirit, of an adventurous spirit, of willing to look in the dark corners and the shadowy corners and to open up doors and to pursue threads and pathways. Because I have this like urge to understand and to be okay with not accepting the current narrative or how people how things are seen or understood, but to dig deeper and to keep searching and keep going further down the hole of uncovering what's really going on. And so clearly to me, that as a kid, I had this sort of premonition of the path that I would be going down in life. And that's definitely the path. I mean, so many of these books are people thinking on the edge of thought or outside of the mainstream way of thinking and seeing things differently. I mean, that again, that's the path of the artist, of the true scholar, of the poet. And so that recurring, I would love to have one of those dreams again. I haven't in a while, but it's stuck with me my entire life. I mean, for well over 30 years. Another recurring dream I had, which was sort of similar, and this one was more probably in middle school and high school, recurring dream. Again, it was another entering through a closet, which is hilarious if you think of like this whole concept of being closeted, like, you know, traditionally in the homosexual sense. But in a way, like I feel like, I've been a closeted, like kind of spiritual guy for a while, and closeted amongst traditional Christian folks, but also amongst like the more secular, the more atheist crowd as well. And so this other recurring dream of entering through a closet, in this time climbing up to the ceiling and entering like kind of like an attic space through this like roof hatch. So I'd have this dream where I would basically go up stairs into what was already kind of an attic, and then there would be another room, and then there would be like some sort of secondary attic space. And in this space, I would enter it and basically be subjected to this sensation, the overwhelming sensation of like ghostly terror and spirits overwhelming me. Kind of like imagine like having like an actual like encounter with a ghost where you're kind of like surrounded by terror. Like that's what this secondary attic room that I would venture into. And again, this was a recurring dream, so I would come back to it, over the course of several years. And I kept going back. And eventually I think I got to the point where I was comfortable in that space. And I was curious, and it felt like, the same way like a roller coaster, you go down a roller coaster and you're like, that was terrifying. Let's do it again. um, that's what this dream was. And so I feel like interpreting this dream, kind of coming more from like a Jungian psychological standpoint, it is this idea of confronting the shadows, confronting the ancestral trauma, the confronting the collective unconscious, these aspects, terrifying aspects of reality and situations and human situations and humanity itself that no one wants to discuss because it's so painful and uncomfortable and shameful and all of these things. But that dream for me was a foretelling that this is something that I am okay with doing, and I embrace doing, and I'm interested in doing. And it's true. I am. That's a lot of what I'm trying to do right now, and making sense of this stuff. So it's essentially the same thing of confronting your own shadow is basically being okay, acknowledging that demon or that ghost or that darkness inside of you, and sitting with it, and ultimately transforming that pain and integrating it or healing it and moving forward. So anywho, that's what I'm thinking about. And yeah, you can see here, I made this shirt recently. Rebus is a kind of mystical concept. If you were to search it and learn about it, you would see a drawing of sort of this like, well, I guess you would call a divine hermaphrodite figure of body with a masculine head and a feminine head. But it's this idea of uniting the opposites within you and purifying yourself and kind of becoming a whole person. And so this, I have reconciled the opposites here, but it's written in French because why not? That just felt more fun and interesting and kind of mystical to me. So that's something I enjoy doing. I like making my own little t-shirt designs. A lot of my t-shirts are shirts that I've created myself, and I'll probably at some point start putting some of these for sale on some sort of website, because why not? Like, again, maybe no one wants them, but people do need shirts in general. And why not buy a shirt from me that's interesting and thought provoking, and again, like that handwritten note to yourself right when you wake up from a dream about something important. I think it's cool to have those notes displayed in your world, whether it's a shirt or a poster or whatever, or a framed print of like a reminder of who you are, what you're about, what you value, so that you don't fall back into the dream like so many of us are. So, anywho, this has been the Chamber of Reflection. My name is Nick Decker. Talk soon.